Schools, who can go to school? Um, French schools are open to any children in France. It's no matter what their status is here. So if you were going to come, I've known some people who have moved for a school year in France. It's not going to be a problem. You will have to supply some proof of residency. You might have to prove some, just to prove that we were just talking about. The French like bureaucracy and they like paperwork, so you kind of have to prove who you are, and that's what you probably have to do. But it is open. School hours in France is a little bit different than in America. Kids don't go to school. Like for example, my son, he goes to primary school. He doesn't go to school on Wednesdays. It was Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Fridays. He used to go to school on Saturday mornings. That's no longer the case. That got changed a few years ago. Um, and the others for junior high or middle school and high school, they go on Wednesday mornings. Wednesday afternoons not, but it does vary from schools. Some schools are a little bit different. This is also a good point to talk about vacations. France, they have about every 6 weeks they have a school vacation, anywhere from 10 days to 2 weeks. So you have one. You start the year. The year always starts in early September. As soon as even if it's a Friday, they start it usually starts on the second. Teachers come back to school on the first, and then kids start on the second. Even if it's a Friday, they start. Going on to the next one, public schools. In France, there's most of the schools I've sent my son to is a public, but there are private schools, and they're not they're not like they are in America. They're actually funded by the state. Teachers are paid for. The teacher salaries, are paid for by the state, so the price isn't really that high. It's about 60, 70 euros. I've had some people that told me. I don't send my son to private school, but that's what I've been told, and so it's definitely not as expensive. They are, in fact, religious schools, but there's not really a religious education. The education is generally the same as in public. It's just that they're owned by the buildings are owned by either Catholic or Jewish or Muslim, and but it's open to all religions. It's not an issue. Um, Next one is hard grading. What does that mean? Well, in France, a passing grade is 50%. Um, to get your when you graduate high school, you pretty much take a test or a series of tests, and you want to get at least 10 out of 20. The grading system's out of 20, and you want to do that. Excuse me. That's so you want to get at least 50%. So it's a little bit more difficult. In America, it's like 70. Teachers a little bit more, it's negative reinforcement. They tell students what they do wrong, not necessarily focusing on what they're doing right. It can be kind of hard. Um, and getting back to school hours, I forgot to mention something. It's pretty much my son goes from about 8:30 to 11:30, and then 1:30 to 4:30, so 6 hours a day. There's a big lunch gap, 2-hour lunch gap, but he goes to the cafeteria, and it's not very expensive, and it's also recess. But it's generally speaking like that when you have that 2-hour gap, and some kids will go home. It's not common for children to go home. Next, moving on, the structure. Structure is pretty much as it is in America. I guess one of the differences, the main difference, is that children start earlier. They go to preschool, which is not mandatory, but often children do it. Children will go, and my son went to, to preschool. They pretty much start when they're potty trained, 2.5 to 3 years. It's not all day. Again, it's not on Wednesdays. It's not all day. It's sometimes just in the morning. And this is good to talk about, that in France there's a system of what's called news, which is basically a a caregiver or a nanny who takes care of the child, and it's in part subsidized by the state.
Went to a nanny.
Excuse me? Did you say something, Jan? And then the next one here is back, and that's actually...
Yeah, no, I just confirmed that.
All right, moving on. We're talking about
no, go ahead, Jeff. There's too much of a delay.
There's too much of a delay, yes. Okay, now talking about the back. The back is the high school diploma, and that's what I actually had mentioned that before. That's what that means. It's a baccalaureate, and that's the degree. And when you get your back, you actually you take a series of tests, and then if you pass the test, that's it. You graduate, and they celebrate and everything, but there's no graduation. Universities in France are pretty other. They're most of the best ones are public, and they're public, and you don't pay a lot. They're not very expensive. All right, so let's move on to the next.